Just as a last question, because I'm sure our students listening to you and probably are very interested, but are a little bit jumping on their seat saying, but what about what's happening right now with the presidential race in the United States, with so much uncivil language, intolerance being expressed quite openly, if not racist speech as part of the presidential rhetoric. What does the tolerant society teach us about this presidential race? What does it tell us?
Well, I think it is very disturbing, of course, to hear things that are being said and proposed today. And yet, I think a deep understanding of freedom of speech teaches one that you should expect this, that we have gone through periods like this, far worse than this. Maybe we are entering a period that is as bad or worse than those, but as of right now, one would have to say we have been through this before. The primary reason for understanding the world in that way is that it makes the point sharply that freedom of speech is not only about protecting people for speaking, it's about an understanding of the human condition, about human nature, about what we strive for, about what we will achieve and get if we are successful in that, and that it has to be won through constant work and effort. It's not something that you can say, we've achieved it, that's the end, it's now going to be good. Quite the contrary, it is something that is only won through exercise and through educating and developing in every generation a commitment to this. So my view is that this is a time in which freedom of speech and press, as we're talking about it and as we've known it, is being tested. And we have to think of it that way, but we have to understand that it's something that is to be expected, and that we must be able to articulate it and act on it in order to preserve it.
You are not adopting at all a balancing approach to that. So for you, the social cost associated with letting those ideas being uttered, including by very powerful individuals, is nothing compared to the possible cost of curtailing that expression. How can that concept be explained to the young generation who find it very difficult, if they are very idealistic, if they don't espouse those ideas, they find it amazing that people should be allowed to utter such things in the context of a presidential race. The social cost of saying those things is mitigated by what?
So I would put it a little differently from what you said, Anya's, right at the beginning. I put it more in terms of an aspiration, not only the cost, not only the relative costs of allowing speech and censoring speech, not the comparative cost, but what are we trying to become as people, as a society, as a world? What do we start with in our natures that we need to address? What will we be as people if we are successful in organizing ourselves in this way, and understanding that comprehensively is what I think is absolutely crucial to continuing to have it. You can't just have it and then forget it with the reasoning and then have it continue. It won't work that way. You have to continue to work at it. All that said, whatever theory or principle you take, I think, to freedom of speech and press, you have to be prepared to continue to debate and discuss whether that is right. So, for example, you're referring, I believe, to what we might fairly call hate speech or speech that denigrates people, innocent people, that tries to evoke an invidious discrimination against people. Should that be protected? Is that part of a world in which we want to live, and why? I've given my arguments about this, and you would have your ideas and theories, and we've developed a kind of way of thinking and talking about this. But we all know, or should know, that it's a hard problem.
Just to say it's a hard problem, but it's different from Skokie.
Yeah.
It's different from having a group of fairly, from people living a little bit on the side, on the sideline of society, wanting to march in a Jewish neighborhood. Here we have a very central, a very mainstream, the embodiment of the American political process. So I think this, to me, is where why it's a little bit more challenging. What do we do when this discourse becomes the embodiment of a very mainstream political party, at least for the next 6 months, and is spread, is distributed, circulated in primetime television? I mean, isn't there a cost there? Aren't we confronting the risk that this kind of speech, or rather the ideas associated with the speech, will not be combated well enough and will become far more ingrained in our society?
So I understand the line of thinking, I think. But you are not proposing that we censor or legally censor speech because it becomes extremely powerful. You're not proposing that. So I think on the principle of freedom of speech, I think we say we have embraced a doctrine that speech that is deeply hurtful to groups and individuals within the society, and dangerous in terms of what it might inspire, except for extremely dangerous situations that would be very hard to define, but except for extremely dangerous situations of imminent sort of harms of a certain kind, except for that, we are going to live with this and use the tools we have to be able to combat this, and that's primarily counter speech and organizing and so on. Now, why do we do that? That's, I think, the key part. People, if you don't understand what you're trying to achieve, if it's hollow, if it's just that's the doctrine, that's what we've, then I think we've lost an enormous amount. It's what do we aspire to be as people, individuals, as a society? Why are we organizing ourselves in this way, in these ways? And why is it still valid to do that? Listening, of course, to other people who say, but I share the goals, but I think we should do it in a different way. That will be a perpetual debate of humankind, not only here, but everywhere. But that vigorous understanding, vital understanding of what we are doing, I think, is absolutely crucial. And it also begins to answer the very acts of hateful, offensive speech that you're alluding to.
Yeah. So ultimately, these are the kind of testing time out of which we can emerge stronger as a society, as a collective.
We take a risk. As Holmes said, as you know, free speech is an experiment, as all life is an experiment. We think we understand. We think we understand ourselves, what we need. This is what we've decided, but we have to be prepared to think this through again and again and again.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
President Lee Bollinger. Thank you.